In this Map Suite MVC Edition sample app walkthrough, we're going to show you how you can find features within a distance of a point that a user clicks. So you can see here that the sample's got your standard map that allows you to pan and zoom around. And we've also got a drop-down box over here with a query distance set of values. So this denotes kilometers. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, say, 5,000. And if we go ahead and click on the map here, somewhere, let's say in the Atlantic Ocean, it's going to go ahead and put a point in the Atlantic Ocean and then highlight any countries that are within 5,000 kilometers of where I clicked. So let's say I chose 2,000 kilometers and click again here in the Atlantic Ocean. You can see now it's only highlighting these that are within 2,000 kilometers. So this can be very useful if you want to give your users the ability to click on the map, find some features near where they clicked, and display that information to them. So to get started, let's take a little closer look at the source code, and let's see how we set the map up first in the controller source. So here in our controller source, we've named it the Spatial Functions Controller, and we've got our default implementation here where we return the map to the view, and this is where we're setting up all of the map for when the application is loaded. So this is your normal Map Suite code where you're adding your map to your page, setting your current extent, map unit, etc. For this sample, we've got a couple different overlays. We've got the World Map Kit as our base map as an overlay, and then we've got a shapefile feature layer here that we're using that contains the actual country boundaries or borders. And this is an area-based shapefile, and you can see here we're adding that to an overlay a little bit further down. And we're giving it a style of transparent. So you may ask, well, if we're not showing it, why are we adding it to the map? And there's good reason for this. Because we're using the World Map Kit WMS Web Overlay as our base map, it's just tiles, and it gets tiled in from the server. There's not actually any feature data there. They're just raster imageries. So when we want to do queries such as distance and things of that nature, we need to actually go to the raw source of the shapefile. So that's why we're adding that shapefile here, and we're making it transparent so when the user clicks on it, we can still do the queries against that data source. Further down here, we also have a highlight layer. This highlight layer, think of it as kind of like a working storage layer where we want to add our results of our distance query and some of the interactions of the user. So on this in-memory layer, we're going to store a few features. We're going to store the point where the user clicked, and we're going to display that with a point style of like a capital so the user can tell where they clicked. And then we're also going to show the countries that were within the distance of that point. And in this example, we're just giving it a color of evergreen, and we're applying that to all the zoom levels. Finally, we add those overlays to the map down here and return the map to the page. So that gets you your default implementation. When you load the map, all of this code is going to execute, and you're just going to have a map of the world, and it's ready for the user to click. Now let's go and take a look at the view source, because there is one other thing I wanted to show you. In the view source here is where we're telling the map control that on the client click we want this JavaScript to fire, this map click function. So in addition to rendering the map out on the page, we're also setting up that event handler for the JavaScript to fire when the map is clicked. So that's where a lot of the magic happens, or that's what initiates the magic, I guess. So when the map click happens, this JavaScript block will execute, and part of the map click event passes in an event argument that will contain the position of where the user clicked. And you can see by this JavaScript code that we get the longitude and latitude, and we also get some other stuff that the user has selected on the page, such as the distance and the drop-down box. And we concatenate all them together into a parameters collection so we can pass them back to the server. Now the way we pass it back to the server so we can actually do the distance query is through this AJAX call action, and that's a JavaScript API that the Map Suite MVC Edition exposes. And it takes several parameters. One is you got to tell it what controller you want it to go to, and then you want to tell it what method inside that controller you want to execute. And then finally, you want to pass in any parameters that you've built up or that you've collected from the user's input or from the screens, and then what you want to happen once the server code has executed. In this case, we want to call the map callback, which is just redrawing the dynamic overlay, which handled our highlight layers and the points of that. So that's pretty much it on the JavaScript side, and most of the heavy lifting of where the distance query is actually happening is back on the controller in this find query features. So let's go there and dig a little bit deeper. So as you'll see here in this find queried features, this is taking in, it gets passed in some event arguments as well, including the map and including geo collection arguments, and these are where our parameters passed in. So the first thing we do in here is we parse out our parameters to get the distance that was selected from the drop-down box in the sample, and we get our X and our Y of where the user clicked. We then create a point shape out of that, and that'll be important when we want to do our query. And then we do get references to both the static and dynamic overlay. And if you remember, the static overlay was containing our shapefile feature layer of the country boundaries, and our dynamic overlay is where we want to do our highlights and the points where the user clicked. Once we got a reference to that information, we also want to go ahead and get a reference to the layer within the static overlay that contains the country boundaries, so we can do a query, and also the highlight layer as well. Down here is where we actually are doing the distance query. So we need to do an open on the world layer, and then if you look on the query tools API, there's a method called getFeatureWithinDistanceOf, and this is really where the magic of the sample application is happening. And into that API call, we pass in the point shape of where the user clicked. We need to tell it the unit that our core data is in. So in this case, our shapefile that contains the country boundaries, and our data is in decimal degree. And then we need to tell it the unit that we want the distance measurement to be. So that drop-down box was kilometers. So we want to tell the map control, yes, it's kilometers, and the distance was 5,000. Okay. And then this last parameter is what column data we want to get back, if any, from those features. In this case, it looks like we're just getting the name back. If you wanted to do a different distance, say miles or feet or meters or something like that, you could just change your distance unit. Instead of being 1,000 kilometers in the distance, it would be 1,000 miles. So it's really easy to change the unit of measurement you want for that distance. So when that query execute, it returns a collection of features. So it's going to return any countries that was within the 5,000 kilometers. And once we have that collection of features, all we need to do then is add that to our highlight layer, and that'll get rendered when we pass things back to the client. So in this little block of code, that's exactly what we're doing. We first clear out any highlighted layers, and in case there was other features already on the map. So if the user clicks multiple times, you're only showing the most recent set of features that they clicked. And then here we're adding the point that they clicked as the point shape. And then we're looping through each of the returned features within that distance and adding that to the highlight layer. And then we're telling the dynamic overlay that we want to redraw on the server side. So that means that the server will redraw the tiles. So when the client gets passed back to it and it does a refresh, it will have the latest tiles as well. So the last little part of this sample is after this would execute, it would go back to the client code. And this map callback would be executed, and we're just going to tell the map one to redraw the layer dynamic overlay. And that's just going to refresh the image, so these green highlight layers will be displayed. So as you can see with this sample, there's a lot of interaction between the client and server, between some JavaScript and some server-side controller code. But it really gives your users a great experience because there's no postbacks. It performs very quickly. And you can, give the user information very visually by doing a lot of these things, such as highlighting the features. I hope this walkthrough has been helpful. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, or you can also post your questions directly on our discussion forums at ThinkGeo.com/forums. Thanks for watching.